a remarkable success that you've achieved with this initiative. Many congratulations on achieving a jump in user satisfaction and appreciation of forecast occurrence, a jump of more than 30% in user appreciation of the residents of informal settlements, of accuracy, and therefore trust in and likelihood to act on the forecasts and on early warnings. Can I ask you exactly how did you understand what the users need? And how did you go about improving the forecast for them?
Thank you very much. Really, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation for the invitation in this wonderful Pavilion Resilience Hub. Really acknowledge the importance of this event. A little bit about the background. In 2009, the World Climate Conference 3 managed to establish what we call the GFCS, Global Framework for Climate Services. And there are 5 pillars that are associated with the Global Framework for Climate Service. And one of the pillars is user interface platform, where by that time, the international community and scientists felt that there is a large gap that exists between provider and user of climate information. Therefore, the call for international community was to every one of us to ensure that we put a tremendous amount of effort to ensure that we bridge the gap between between provider and user. Therefore, the implementation of DARAJA, which is called Bridge, is one of the response, or is actually the implementation of GFCS under the pillar of user interface platform. Because DARAJA came to try to bridge that gap between the provider of the weather and climate information and product and the user, end user. Now, coming back to your question, how did we, try our best to make sure that we understand the user needs and try to make sure that our service is informed by exactly what the user needs. Through the implementation of DARAJA, we collaborated with our colleague mapping of the user needs. So we did a comprehensive user engagement under DARAJA, and we were actively involved in the implementation of this activity to try to understand the user needs through comprehensive user engagement. So that is what exactly we did, and it enables us to gather all exactly what the user needs. So that's what I can say for the time being, that we needed to do a comprehensive engagement, stakeholders engagement, to try to determine what exactly they need. Historically, majority of MET services, National Meteorological Hydrological Services, we provide information, we provide services based on our own understanding of what user needs. But through DARAJA and through GFCS, we came with this approach of undertaking a comprehensive user engagement to try to determine exactly what the user needs. This has been the gap for majority of our MET services, including us in Tanzania. And therefore, DARAJA contributed towards enhancing understanding of the user needs, which is critical for what we call full value chain of climate services, which is have to start with user and end with user.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Chandra. Thank you, Dr. Chandra. Tell us a little bit more about the design federation here, poor, the local authorities, schools, and the media, all feeding back on the development of the new Dar es Salaam forecasts.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I think there was some interruption. If you can repeat again the question.
I was asking about the co-creation workshops that you had with the urban poor federations, the media, local authorities.
Yes, so if I said that our first approach in the implementation of DARAJA was to map the user needs through comprehensive user engagement, and then we started an exercise of then we sat together with the users from different, local authorities and media as well, and try to see how do we move together and try to produce exactly what the user needs in terms of the product, but also in terms of the packaging of the product. Because normally we have this problem of accessibility and applicability of the product because of the lack of understanding about the format, about the needs. So we co-designed exactly what the user need in terms of the packaging, in terms of the format that they would like to receive the information. That was critical, and we did together and form as one of the success story in the implementation of NIA.
Changa, thank you very much for taking time out of your packed schedule here at COP26. We know you're part of the official delegation, heavily involved in the negotiations. It really means a lot that you've joined us today to share your insights. We also understand this means that we might lose you to official business here. So again, thank you very much. I'd also like to remind anyone listening in that do please send through any questions that you might have into the chat box, and we'll try and have them answered to the best of our abilities. With that, we're going to turn to yet another really exciting example of how DARAJA is being applied in Dar es Salaam, and I request the tech team to please play spot number 2.
Successful DARAJA pilot project was the engagement of school children. And through DARAJA, the students were able to gain knowledge on weather and climate information. And by doing that, they were able to gain the knowledge at early stage. And there has been an increase of communication between the parents, teachers, and students, particularly during weather events such as rainfall, where they could be able to communicate and make sure that students are very safe and their properties are able to be kept at the safe place.
Wonderful. Another excellent little film, really illustrative of the impact of DARAJA. DARAJA pioneer, Stella Stephen, Monitoring and Evaluation Officer with the Center for Community Initiatives in Dar es Salaam. Stella, a very warm welcome and thank you so much for joining our panel today. Many congratulations on the DARAJA Pilot Schools program. I understand you are one of the people who worked with Dr. Changa to co-design the new forecast. I wanted to ask you, how did you manage to reach so many school children and their families so quickly?
Yeah, thank you, Adita, for having me in this platform. Regarding the question you mentioned, I think referring to what Dr. Changa has said, the co-design process was the key factor in this project, where key stakeholders from different areas, including students, teachers, were part of the pilot on school was one of the area which was identified. So it means the needs of students, the needs of teachers were included in the process and the design process. Another factor was which has helped is we created the champions at school through school clubs, which were trained together with through the facilitation of TMA and training the teachers so that they can understand the information. Those technical languages were simplified in a way that students are able to understand, not only to understand the technical language, but also to know why it is important to respond to weather and climate information and how they could disseminate the information to the parents and the community at large. So we have those champions, which were teachers together with students, where the students were able to lead these campaigns at the school where parents were consulted, and students were able to demonstrate why this information is important. So it means there was a corresponding action where students were able to disseminate the information and the parents understood why this information is very important so that they can take action, but also support students who are going to school. And I think another thing which facilitated this to reach that number, the experience of CCI working together with the Tanzania Urban Poor Federation for many years in informal settlement was very tremendous in facilitating the process. It means it was not that very difficult to engage the community, to engage the students for more than 15 years. So this is how we managed to reach that big number.
Thank you. It's really super interesting. In the video, you mentioned that the families of school children took early action against rain forecasts, but did they also take action against other forecasts of extreme weather, heats, cyclone?
Yes, I think the common weather forecast here, it has been more on rainfall, especially flooding. I think it is a common one. But through DARAJA, we are able to identify that the heat is one of the areas where the community, the children and different city stakeholders need much information. And through DARAJA, we are able to provide not only the heat information, but provide the advice together with the collaboration to that. And to have the example, for example, at school, one of the action that we are taking, some of the schools were able to allocate, to install the drinking water at school where students could be able to drink water during the heat, but also other schools could come with, a student could come with water at school, which we thought that it's very good to see that action are being taken. But it's one of the area where the community and the student and the other city stakeholders saw that there is a need to provide more advice so that they could respond to that.
Fantastic, Stella. So if others want to replicate what you've done in other contexts, in other geographical contexts, what would be 2 or 3 pieces of advice for them and 2 or 3 words of warning?
are very critical in the process, because it provides the opportunity where key stakeholders in the area or in the city to engage in the process, to understand why we are engaging this process, why it is important, but also to respond to the needs of the users, which is very critical. I think Dr. Changa has mentioned that. And I think another advice is to look on different channels. I think we are more used on common channel, TV, social media, radio, but the community have other local channels. For example, the schools, for example, the groups within the community, local leaders, these are the channels which can be incorporated with the other channel to make sure that the information reach a large number of people. But another aspect which I would advise, because the community need to understand what does the information mean to them and how they can respond to that. I think these are very critical advice I would provide. Maybe what to do, you need to go with, in implementing this project, we need to go with the weather. I mean, sometimes find that you are planning the project, but you need to make sure that you target those weather so that those plans go together with the time where the weather, maybe rainfall, heat is available, so that you can test it and see how does it work. But it's very critical to engage different intermediaries. And I think immediate consideration to ensure that the process ensure that different targets group are being reached. So media is very critical. It should be left out.
Great, Stella, thank you so much. One additional question from me. To my mind, this is probably one of the very few initiatives in the world that is engaging young people and children on issues of climate information. I wanted to ask you, in your experience, do children look at climate impacts or climate change as an issue in ways that are markedly different from how adults look at it? If so, can you illustrate with an example?
Yeah, I think they look at it different, and actually it affects them a lot. During the engagement of school children, there were so many stories which students were able to tell. Students say that we would like to see these forecast information through our TV, but the parents are not allowing us to see the television. Sometimes they chase us from the living room so that either we can go to study or to sleep. And these are some of the stories that I see that the impartation of this knowledge should start at the family level. And when the student understands the information, it is more easier to transmit it to parents and others. We could see one of the story is some of the students which were engaged in the DARAJA were even able to help the neighboring students during maybe if they are crossing the bridge. And so this made some of the school to come when they approach that they would like to get other information, because some of the students want to this weather. So we shouldn't left out the students. They have so many stories to tell, especially at family level, but also at school.
Well, really fascinating stuff. And again, many congratulations on this extremely successful, innovative initiative.
Thank you.
With that, we're now going to return to Nairobi, where DARAJA was also operating during roughly the same period. And yes, I'll request the tech team to please play spot number 3.
Initially, there was a big gap between the community and other stakeholders. So DARAJA through KDI has played a major role in bringing the community and all the stakeholders together.
Great, another fantastic film. We're delighted that we're joined by Community Director Regina Opondo from the Konkoi Design Initiative. Regina, very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really great to see DARAJA at work in another city. And we know that you play a key role in the community team at your organization, KDI. I wanted to ask you that Priska said that KDI played a major role in bridging that gap between stakeholders, particularly between the residents and the forecasters at KMD, the Kenya Meteorological Department. Exactly how did KDI bridge that gap?
Thank you, and I am glad to be here implementing the DARAJA project. So we're glad to share the learning and experience we've had. KDI has for a very long time had a strong standing partnership with communities in Kibera, the residents of Kibera. We've been investing a lot in building partnerships, working very closely with them on all our other initiatives, and even having staff from the community amongst our staff, such as Priska herself. Our participatory approach to our work means that we always try to bring on board as many partners as possible from the beginning to the end. So whether it is co-design, co-implementation, and even maintenance and maintaining the relationships after that. So by the time the opportunity, I think we were already suitably placed to be an intermediary between residents and the Kenya Meteorological Department, and to be able to bridge that gap between the two partners, but also other stakeholders that then added a lot of value to the project. Being a state agency was also very open and very eager to work with communities. So we spent very little time building rapport, which has not always been the case when we work with state agencies, parastatals, and government institutions. So part of the things that helped us in building this relationship and making it strong was, number one, researching to understand the levels of access, the use of weather and climate information by the residents of Kibera and other informal settlements, and what would be the most suitable channels of communications for the community. And the findings of this research was also shared with KMD. The second was in the co-design workshops, similar to what Dr. Changa mentioned. So we did a lot of working together from design to actual implementation. And to date, we still have a very strong partnership where we're supporting and working with KMD to develop new products and test those products and bringing them still close to the community. So in that, we were also able to develop icons to improve community from KMD. And then in collaboration with other partners, which included media stakeholders, like community radios, chiefs and other actors in Nairobi County government, we were able to conduct some capacity building, not just for community actors, but also for government actors who would be responders or who would proactively do something. And these included trainings for community radio stations on how to communicate weather and climate change information in a simple, clear way and in the language of the community. And then also have the radio stations incorporate experts such as those from KMD to share this invaluable information with the community. So we really appreciate the partnership with the Kenya Meteorological Department. And as I mentioned, it remains strong to date. And we know that they're also present at COP26, representing the interests of the community.
Regina, thank you so much for that. Exact 98% of the surveyed residents said that they use the information produced under DARAJA to take early action. That is an astonishingly high percentage. What do you think are the reasons behind this high response rate?
Well, when we started off with DARAJA, one of the first things we did was also do baseline collecting of information. And from the residents we surveyed in the baseline study, the indications were that they do use weather and climate information. 76% of the residents that we spoke to do use this information to take one form of action or the other, even though they struggle with it. But after the implementation of DARAJA, when we went back to just check how we are doing, we then saw a significant improvement in access to weather and climate information, and even understanding of the weather and climate information by residents. And this could be attributed to several. Improved is access to the information because of the communication channels being used to share this information. And what we had discovered from the baseline was that preferred channels include radio, text messaging, and those were primarily used for this project. Second was the great and vibrant leadership of the Weather Mtaani leaders. And these were people who were already leaders in their community in their own right, but also were a key component of the community communication system developed under DARAJA. They would receive their information from KMD, translate it into an easy to understand language for the rest of their community, and then share that via SMS and WhatsApp, and sometimes even on Facebook. And it didn't just stop there because they were very proactive. They would also provide advice similar to what we saw in Dar es Salaam, the advice given to students about what people should do, what precautions people should take, but even organizing activity. Most often they would also be first responders or connect the community to first responders when a disaster happens in response to the climate change event that has happened. And then the third is working very closely with community radio stations like Pamoja FM in Kibera, Coach FM in Korogosho, and Ruben FM in Mukuru, amongst many others, who then, once they understood the language, understood the concept, understood the ideas, were able to tailor their programming to suit the needs of the communities that they serve. And this is through language, simplifying the language, making it regular announcements, and even creating this access to KMD, which is a body people only saw somewhere up there in the ivory tower. So bringing the science closer to the people. So these and other factors, I think, largely contributed to building trust in the information. And we all know that trusting the messenger is often as important as trusting the message.
Trusting the messenger is as important as trusting the message. Now, I wanted to ask you, to the uninitiated, can you give a few practical and tangible examples of what early action looks like for people living in informal settlements? What are they doing when they receive these forecasts?
All right. So for example, if they receive a message saying that there's a possibility of heavy rain or some sort of rain coming, then early action looks like first, ensuring that those that are close to the rivers start to either clean out the drain so that when it rains, there's no flooding in the alleyways and the water doesn't get into the houses. So cleanups become very important. So you start to see people cleaning out the drains, getting rid of the rubbish and anything that would cause flooding that would then have water enter into the house. Sometimes you see people making arrangements to move temporarily. So moving furniture, moving valuables. Risk are also not at home. For business people, it's also ensuring that either their shops are protected against flooding so that they don't lose business, they don't lose items that they might sell, etc. So those are just some small examples of what that would look like. Simpler ones, similar to Tanzania, is if there's going to be a lot of heat, just advising people to drink water, dress appropriately, avoid heat stroke, and keep in the shade.
Regina, thank you so much for this compelling example and for really illustrating the reality of what early action looks like. With that, we're going to move on to another speaker. We're going to go beyond Nairobi and Dar es Salaam to really explore whether DARAJA has relevance and resonance in other cities. I'd like to begin by turning across the African continent to West Africa and to Sierra Leone in particular, where I'm delighted that the mayor's office in Freetown Unfortunately, the mayor was unable to make it due to a public emergency relating to an oil tanker explosion, but we are deeply grateful for Abdullah for standing in for the mayor and exploring these issues today. Abdullah, a very warm welcome to you on the panel. Thank you so much for joining us. And please accept our heartfelt condolences for this terrible tragedy that has happened in your city. I want to begin by asking you that, having listened to our colleagues from Dar es Salaam and Nairobi, what do you think is particularly relevant for Freetown, which I understand also has a major population based in informal settlements and high amounts of vulnerability to climate change?
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to be here. The goal of improving the relevance of Freetown, because 30% of Freetown residents live in informal settlements. And also, while this entire city of Freetown is very vulnerable to disasters, informal settlements are especially vulnerable because they are often in areas that have the highest climate risk. For example, informal settlements next to sea or a river are very vulnerable to flooding, and informal settlements on hills are very vulnerable to landslides. So Britonians that live in informal settlements also often don't have the financial resources, right? And to rebuild their lives after disaster strikes. So it is better to enable these communities to avoid disaster through early warning systems. Yes, saves 6% spent on reconstruction. So that's just the basic philosophy behind it. So early warning systems can help to protect the fragile economic and livelihoods of many people in informal settlements. And using this DARAJA approach to empower community to basically provide early warning systems is very valuable, because it will free the capacity for our city disaster risk management team. Because I'm very much impressed that the work DARAJA did at I think it is in Kenya, in identifying key stakeholders and assessing how they normally channel and the formats they do in capturing, in passing information, providing the opportunity for residents to feedback. So that's very much impressive, and we're online. And we're doing a bit of those things here in Freetown. Yeah.
Thank you, Abdullah. So can I ask you whether the mayor has any plans to engage with DARAJA in Freetown?
Yes.
And go on, please.
Okay. We have already begun to engage with DARAJA, and the DARAJA team conducted an initial scoping visit to Freetown in 2019, and was prepared to move to the next stage shortly thereafter, but the plan was put on hold due to the COVID. And last month, Freetown Disaster Risk Management team started. Then we're aligned on a concept note to take the idea forward. And currently, we're looking for funders to support implementation.
Right. Well, I also want to ask you, Freetown is one of the first cities in the world to appoint a team to deal with extreme temperature. And I know you're part of that team. Tell us a little bit about how this has come about and how this team might work with DARAJA.
Yes. So basically, we've done a lot more in preventing disasters before they occur, because for now we've been working with the Sierra Leone Meteorological Agency in having some weather forecast. So after confirming this weather forecast, we will liaise directly with stakeholders in the community like the ward councillors, the chiefs in the different communities, for them to be aware about the high tide we're expecting. If that is the information we received from Sierra Leone Meteorological Agency, we've already identified some safe locations at different communities wherein residents can temporarily move from their houses to those points that are safe enough when such incidents strike. Yep.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. And again, please accept our condolences and all the very best to you and your colleagues for dealing with the emergency there. And again, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to continue on our global journey and travel across the pond, where we are really privileged today to be director of the meteorological services in Jamaica. Evan, we're really delighted that you're here with us today. I understand you're the head of MSJ, but also the president of the Americas for the World Meteorological Organization, representing 27 countries. Could I bother you with taking a regional view, and above all, a Caribbean view, and really ask you how relevant you feel DARAJA is to your region?
Thank you so much for inviting me and for allowing me to join you on this session. It's really tremendous. I joined you quite a bit late because I was having some significant connection challenges, but I am here. So I managed to catch a couple of the examples that were shared, the experiences that were shared. And I have been over time, and it is obvious to me that a lot of work is being done to meet the people who are disadvantaged because of our situations, being in developing countries or least developed countries as we're called. Sometimes there are just some resources that are just not available to us. And we desire and need the kind of inputs that Resurgence, for example, can provide to us. And we are really delighted to see some of those examples being experienced and expressed coming out of the African continent. It's tremendous. And I've been watching the work. I've seen that many of our challenges are very much the same. Again, just like as you mentioned, I represent a number of countries in this region. And in particular, the Caribbean region with a number of countries, but we're all connected in some way. To tell the truth, the Caribbean Sea is what joins us together. That is what has connected us as countries. And although we are diverse, and although we have various cultures and experiences, we do have similar experiences and similar challenges that we're facing that have to do with our climate and our weather and our water. And what we're seeing happening across the continent of Africa, where so many countries are joining together, or at least sharing their experiences and learning from each other, but at the same time, being able to see some kind of development take place and some hope for moving forward despite the challenges that we experience. I think that this is something that must also be adopted in the Caribbean region. Just as much as we are diverse, we do have similar context, with the similar So there is so much we are learning from the experiences of our counterparts in the African continent. And we can adopt the best practices. We've been hearing about some of them. And in fact, we have our own experience now of working along with the Resurgence to develop some kind of work that we believe what has happened in Africa can be adopted in the Caribbean. So we see it very much as a very similar scenario, although we are so different. Although we are on separate sides of the Atlantic Ocean, we do have similar challenges and we can learn from each other.
Thanks, Evan. So yes, just picking up on that last point. I mean, I understand that you have your own DARAJA initiative underway in Jamaica. Tell us a little bit about one sort of tangible learning from Salaam or Nairobi that you may have heard today. I know you joined a bit late in your own country.
Yes, well, as I say, the challenges are similar. And so some of the things that have been employed in Africa, in some of the countries that have been mentioned here, Salaam and wherever else, we would see that some of them are very much applicable here. We're attempting at this point in Jamaica to develop a weather application, something that will allow us to meet our customers or our clients or our population at the point of their need, what it is that they desire in terms of what is expected in the weather and the climate scenario. How can they prepare themselves by being provided with early warning systems that are applicable to them, that they help to create because of seeing the kinds of the technologies that may be adopted that can advance their own livelihoods where they in Africa, we are seeing how we can also be using them in Jamaica. So we're using those examples. We're seeing where the stakeholder engagements that have taken place in Africa, we've learned from that. And we have gone to start to meet with all the persons who we believe we can impact and see what it is that they really desire. How do the messages get transferred to them in the best possible way. So we are looking at that. There are some models that have been utilized elsewhere that we believe we can also adopt. So we have been looking at them and we're seeing how we can use them in creation of a weather application, because that's one of the main deliverables in this project that we're following through with now with the Resurgence. So time we intend to be trailblazers in our region because we realize that there are others in the Caribbean that are not looking in that direction right now, or they have a desire, but they have not started the journey of moving toward in the same direction as we are. So we believe that after we have developed what we are doing in Jamaica, we'll be able to replicate that in other countries in the Caribbean, and they will also benefit in similar ways. So what is happening on that side of the Atlantic is being translated to this side and then will be spread throughout the region, like a plague, like a COVID-19 probably, but of course in a very positive way that we're seeing that we're going to be making change and it will be spreading and making a difference.
Right. Well, can I ask you as an external observer, so does it worry you that DARAJA has been applied on the African continent is primarily the Caribbean and want to take it beyond the urban context? Do you think it is applicable beyond the urban context? And any concerns there?
Most definitely, because what we are, our intention is to reach the entire country, whether it's urban or rural or wherever people are, wherever the population exists. There is the need for information that is related to weather and climate, and also for early warning systems to reach you wherever you are. You could also be, you might be on the land, but you may also be out in the waters, in the ocean, in the Caribbean Sea. And we're also developing a product that will be usable by not only those persons who are on the land, but also in the marine areas. So they will be able to receive the information and they'll be able to act on the information to save their livelihoods, to make sure that they continue to exist by saving their lives. And of course, urban areas, but right across Jamaica, right across the entire region of the Caribbean. And so that's the intention, to reach all the people as far as we can reach.
Okay. Evan, thank you so much for joining us today and for making such a persuasive case for a Caribbean DARAJA. And no doubt that it's going to become living, breathing initiatives very soon that will going to bring big improvements in the lives of vulnerable Caribbeans.
No doubt. Thank you so much. Resurgence has been really great in our region, and we just look forward to seeing the full rollout in time to come. Thank you.
With that, we're going to travel all the way across the world to another island nation, where I'm delighted to be joined by Bapon Fakhruddin, the Technical Director for DR and Resilience at Tonkin Taylor. joining us, especially because it's an earthly hour for you. Again, I mean, it was an unreasonable request for us to ask you to join today. We are really, really delighted that you have acquiesced. You're a leading expert on early warning systems design, and you have, prestigious awards. What, in your view, are the specific contributions of DARAJA to early warning systems for early action on climate risks?
Thank you, Aditya. I mean, I was listening some of the case study that you are presenting, and also very nice to see some of the colleagues that recently worked with, like Ivan and Regina from Kenya. And I was trying to capture a couple of the keywords that each of those presenters are actually presenting. And if you could just try to resonate these things with, for an example, when you try to, the meal is actually quite delicious when it's all the ingredient is actually put together into the right way, right? And that's how we said, oh, it's delicious, it's fabulous. So if you look at on the early warning perspectives and DARAJA, the one that they demonstrated actually throughout the globe, there are a couple of good information that has been provided. One is champion, inclusive, cohesive, innovation, solution oriented, gender responsive, and then just mentioned interconnectedness. And these are the critical ingredient for an end-to-end or impact-based early warning system, what we are talking about. And the DARAJA able to actually success because you actually built your whole system using some of these ingredients. And that's maybe the successful story here. We are listening from various part of the diagnostic of an early warning system or effectiveness of an early warning system of how actually the DARAJA, which is actually quite nice name, that bridge from science, institution, and society. We need to look at actually, if you look at like severe weather or short range forecasting system, it's actually doesn't give you a quite good evaluation of proper diagnostic because there are system is quite complex. You have come up with so many argument and you can actually blame anyone. Either it made service, it may be communication, it could be community or many other factor. But when you look at a little bit medium range and long range forecasting, like seasonal forecasting, say El Nino and La Nina, this is a social responsibility by the community to receive a seasonal forecasting. And it doesn't actually happen through like a proper early warning system on a day-to-day basis because the forecast may go for weekly or monthly. And that's maybe the good way to making sure that it has been prepared well enough, connecting to the people and need-based solution, because as a human being, we'll not be able to respond any of those information that we receive unless we internalize ourselves. So there is always some risk, but as a human, I like to take a calculated risk, right? So once I know my risk, I actually try to take that kind of response or action on that perspectives. And that's why it comes actually that once you package the information due to the user needs, because every single person, every single sector, every single sector has their differential needs. And the information, if doesn't come as their way they like, they will not actually receive it. They will not able to trust it. They will not able to take any response that we have. So that there are a lot of correlation with this, new normal situation, with the emerging situation is evolving, how actually we need to be interconnected, cohesive, and as well as transformative to work towards to making sure that early warning has an early action. Great. And I think that's answer your question on how
it really does.
could be helpful.
That one really does, but I guess I'm sure you're expecting my next question, which is speaking from the perspective of someone who lives in the Pacific region. What potential do you see for DARAJA being replicated, scaled up, implemented, whatever word you want to use, in that region? What might be some of the particular challenges that the region might pose to DARAJA? What might be some of the opportunities?
I think there are quite significant opportunity for DARAJA or similar modeling Pacific aspect. If you look at the Southeast Asia and Pacific, especially on the medium range and long range forecasting or seasonal forecasting aspect, as you're sitting on a COP26 and you may be hearing so much noise about that, how actually the climate is going to be already impacting us and how actually it will be create or worsen our situation in the future. And there are actually quite strong correlations if you see Pacific as well as Southeast Asia, that how the El Nino, La Nina, MJO, Pacific dipole, southeasterly has an influence over the climate as well as in the weather, and how actually it could create some significant extreme event, and which is actually could be challenging for these poor people or these vulnerable people to cope up with. And in that respect, the major aspect is how actually you adapt as well as mitigate. This could be an early warning system to set so that they had in advance warning and they know actually what they could actually take as a preparedness to dealing with those kind of things. There is still room for improvement. There are actually some of the initiatives maybe you can also see in Southeast Asia started, it's like called Climate Forum, Monsoon Forum, where they try to bridge the user versus provider. And that's maybe, we don't say that DARAJA, but that is actually DARAJA, which is actually bridging between the user versus provider into trying to understand actually what is user need and how actually the information could be packaged based on the user need. And that kind of modeling and that kind of modality and process could be applicable for Pacific, which is not yet quite strongly applied, but there are actually quite room to engage our community as well as our forecast provider. And one of the reasons not this is working behind meteorology, hydrology, climate change, as well as disaster management. They actually try to work in a quite silos environment. And even though actually we are living in a small country or a small island space, so it requires actually how more cohesively, inclusively, we try to work together to making sure that there is an interconnectedness. As a coming from New Zealand, we believe on our indigenous knowledge, like Maori, Te Maori. And in Te Maori, we believe that everything is connected. Your ocean, your sky, your land is as interconnected, and then everything happens for a reason. So we need to make sure that actually we are interconnected also from the science, institution, and society using DARAJA as a bridge.
Paul, thank you very much for joining us today and for your very pithy, clear, insightful responses to these questions on where it has been really applied in a big way.
Thank you so much, Aditya.
Now, we're going to zoom out of the country perspective and take a global perspective. And we're really delighted and honored to be joined by Beth Chitweke-Bitty, the acting managing director of Slum and Shack Dwellers International. Beth, it's my lucky day. You're speaking 2 times in a day. And in the morning, you had a chance to grill me. Now I have a chance to grill you.
It's lovely to be here. And thank you very much for having me. And thank you, Resurgence, for inviting us to be part of this very interesting conversation.
But I guess the question to you is, you heard all these speakers talk about this remarkable initiative in different contexts. But I just want you to reflect on what you've heard. From what you've heard, what concerns you about it, and what is the potential you see for it being scaled up, replicated across other contexts in which your organization operates to help reduce risk and build resilience.
Thank you, Aditya. I think I was very pleasantly surprised to see my colleague Stella from the SDI affiliate in Tanzania, who are pioneers in trying to test out how this process can work in informal settlements. There are a lot of synergies that I see. SDI is a network organized now in 33 countries with within 100 cities. So informal informal settlements is they often are located in some of the most risky areas. So risk to flooding, often in coastal cities close to rising sea levels, in the wind pathways. And we have definitely seen an increase in fires, in floods. We have also seen evictions that are, I suppose, argued for due to where people are located. In our session in the morning, Adija, the different to do in terms of like just identifying where the risk actually exists. Where I see a tool like DARAJA working is actually on understanding the risk before it happens, and in that respect, supporting communities to be prepared. The urban poor, as a matter of course, have to adapt. They are the first responders. In a lot of cases where you have had full-scale fires, there are no fire trucks coming to douse the fires. The community have to organize themselves to do that. Where there is flooding, they have to school kids sometimes they have to stay at home because they can't cross flooded rivers. So they just absolutely is no option for slum dwellers. They have to adapt as a matter of course. So having a tool that can actually enable them in the preparedness is really very impressive and works and is very aligned to the tools that SDI has championed around collecting your own information and using that information to be prepared against evictions, for instance, or to be prepared in terms of ensuring that there is adequate water and sanitation. The video that I saw of the community, you develop systems that can use existing channels of communication, can use social networks that exist. And one of the biggest assets of the SDI network is actually the social networks that are developed by communities who work together, women that come together to save and then also support each other. So I see that there are definitely significant synergies with what our colleagues in Dar es Salaam and the communities in the slums in Kibera in Kenya have been able to pilot. Yes.